Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going to finish up today with a special selection, which is where one of you tell me exactly what it is I need to check out. Today's comes at us from Bratislav, Blur, Trimm Trabb. This is going to be interesting because we had a chance to explore Blur yesterday, and it was my first introduction to them outside of the Song 2. So we're going to be diving into another one from them. It's going to be cool to kind of have this back to back. We are going to be listening to Trimm Trabb from Blur.
Got no style. I take my time. All those losers on the piss again. I doze away. That's just the way it is. That's just the way it is. I got Trimm Trabb.
Very chill. Ooh, a little bit of darkness added to that.
Just the way it is, 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 just the way it is. That's just the way it is. Like the French boys had, and I can't go back. Let it flow, let it flow.
Really interesting movement in our guitar without shifting the rhythm.
I sleep in love. I sleep in love. I sleep in love.
Applying the reverb and delay from the vocals onto the piano to get this really trance-like ethereal sounds.
That's just the way it is. That's just the way it is. Trimm Trabb, like the Flash Boys had. But I can't go back. Let it flow, let it flow. I sleep in love. I sleep in love. I sleep in love. I sleep in love.
return to the piano bit. Just that sub bass rumble. Okay. Ah. I think Blur is just not for me. And granted, I'm basing that off of two songs. I know I put out five. This is like a full stop. Two songs. Um, but it's heavy use of repetition consistently for entire songs that feel like they go everywhere and nowhere. It's cyclical, but also static. It feels like we explore things, but we never do. And it just, it grates on me, which is honestly a little disappointing because for both this track and yesterday's, why can't I remember what? Oh, Jets. Yeah, Jets. Those lyrics. Um, I enjoy the general sound they're going for, and I'm usually getting into what they're attempting to, or what they are accomplishing initially. It really is the repetition that ends up pushing me away by the end of it, and that's not even to say that I don't think that these songs work in concept. They just go on for far too long for my tastes. Because they do change. Like when we checked out Jets yesterday, and if you're curious, there's the link for Jets right there. Um, we had that A B A C structure. There are changes. We do get away from our A. Not so much here. There is a shifting of styles, but it's more of a sonic shift where the underlying musical concept does not change. We get a variation on that, primarily when we switch from our cleans to the distorted guitars. So this one actually feels more repetitive, but also the massive shift in tone and atmosphere give it a bit of a kickstart, possibly, that helps reinvigorate my interest in what's happening, even if it's playing the exact same stuff. Yeah, so that's my subjective take on this track. I like some parts of it. I just don't want to hear it for 6 minutes. How long is this track? 5 minutes and 38 seconds. Yeah, that's just too long in my books for a single concept to not really change. I'm all for having a unified foundation and for things above it to shift and mold and transform and take me on something a bit more linear. But when your foundation is what's in the focus, what's in the spotlight, that's when it becomes just a bit much for me personally. But like I said, let's move away from the subjective. Let's hit up some objective. What is going on in here? We have our guitar line. Bum 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 ba dum bum bum dun dun dun, something along those lines. Um, Static at the beginning, moving at the end. The movement at the end pulls us back into our beginning. Our bass is primarily doing something similar. It's a little different rhythmically, but the accented beats are very similar, and it just basically supports what our guitar is doing. Our drums are giving us the same thing we heard yesterday on Jets, which is bass kick on 1 and 3, snare drum on 2 and 4, hi-hat throughout. We do have a different hi-hat rhythm rather than straight eighth notes like we had on Jets. This one is a bit more rhythmically compact, where there's like 5 eighth notes at the beginning and then a quick rest and then a couple eighth notes at the end of the bar, and then I think another little rest before going back into that pocket of 5. But just like Jets, we are looking at a, well, no, Jets had a 2-bar phrase in it. This is a 1-bar phrase. Yep. The guitar lick, the drum pattern, the bass lick, they all exist within 4 beats. It's, I don't know, a second and a half worth of music repeated ad nauseum for 6 minutes almost. We hear this, what these 3 instruments are doing, we hear it so many times over the course of this track. And that's what really ties into my subjective take about not really enjoying it by the end, is that you really have to like this core sound they're going for because you hear it a lot. Now, granted, this stuff is not what is in the spotlight, and it does change, and we'll touch on that in a second. There are 2 bits of vocal things going on top of it. We have a very mellow humdrum, just kind of low energy type of singing above it. Um, it's got that low effort perception where it sounds like it doesn't take a lot of force or energy to sing. It's just a very comfortable, quiet area for the vocalist to create music within. And it matches the atmosphere that the music's crafting too. I'd mentioned early on in the reaction that it feels very laid back, and it does. There is tension within it. It isn't devoid of interesting elements, but it is a very casual sounding sound that just feels lethargic, not ambivalent. It understands that there are dangers or problems or tensions around. It just doesn't have the energy to really participate in this drama or these issues around them. So you get this music that is, it occasionally dips into these very tense and or dark chords, but primarily it just feels like there's just no energy. Like you just need to lay there in bed, and you know that laying there in bed is only going to make your day worse. You really need to get up and get a jump start on something. Maybe you need to prepare to leave for an occasion or your job, or you have errands to run or whatever, and you just can't muster the energy to do it. That's what this song feels like. But these vocals aren't the only ones. There's also spoken word elements that just sounds like, I don't even know. There's overlapping vocal elements that it kind of sounds like a conversation, but I don't think the two are talking to each other. Maybe they're just overlapping elements that makes it feel dense. I honestly don't know. I didn't pick up any words or ideas either. So I don't know what they were talking about or what the words even were. It just kind of exists on its own. I'm really curious to get to the lyrics and hear what's being said in here. I'm kind of scared it's going to be like yesterday's Jets, where it's just, I don't want to say nonsense, but yeah, in that realm. I'm sure I'm sure the band has a purpose for their lyrics and intention behind them, but I could not decipher it yesterday, and I don't want to be put in that position today either. Now, after, I don't, what's the structure of this song? Like, Eventually, sometime in the song around the middle point, we came back to our riff. Never really left. And we kicked in the overdrive on the guitars though. And we kicked in some extra oomph in the bass, and I think the drums opened up a little bit. We heard a little bit more intensity from the impacts, so they were a bit louder, they were a bit sharper, but I think there was a little bit more movement in them as well. It wasn't just that snare on 2 and 4 idea. And it like I said, it injected this bit of energy to the track that it desperately needed just as far as my attention goes. But it was short-lived, and I feel it was more thematically purposeful than them believing their music was getting boring and they needed something to change. Because it isn't just the guitars that get the oomph. The like I said, the bass, the drums come in, they start playing heavier, and the vocals come in with a bit more power, a bit more air pressure in their delivery, which increases the electricity of the vocal work as well. It is altogether more momentous despite there being no tempo, time signature, or rhythmic shift. And I think that's interesting, especially when paired with the idea that the first half of this track feels lethargic to me. I'm not sure what to make of it. The song just feels like, hey, we were lazy, then we found some momentum, some inspiration to do what we needed to do, and that's really all the music tells me. So again, I'm curious what we see in the lyrics that might be able to tie into this, because otherwise I don't really have any larger themes to explore on this. It just is. That's just my read on it is lethargy and energy. I never really realized they rhyme. That's pretty neat. There is another part to this track though that I want to talk about, and that's our chorus. I don't even know if it is a chorus. It is the first time that our guitars change, and I pointed it out in the middle of the reaction. I think it was about 2 minutes in. The guitar continues on the exact same rhythm they've been playing, but they change the notes. We have a chordal movement on it that isn't a 1-to-1 ratio at all times. That is to say that if we're going to change chords and we move our root note down, I don't know, 1.5 whole steps, that every note is going to be moved down 1.5 whole steps. That doesn't always happen. It does the first couple of times, but there are some occasions where we will go 2, 3 bars at a time where we just have a root tone. We don't move the melody with it. It's one note and the rhythm is played over that note. It almost feels like getting stuck in the mud when we have, up until that point, had consistent movement, even though it was cyclical. We always started and ended at the same place. There was still this concept of movement. We explored, we rose in notes and dropped in notes. It wasn't just a single tone with a rhythm to it. And it stands out to me. And it does happen within a larger pattern. Whereas the verse, I think is what I'm going to call it, was that one bar looped over and over and over and over. The chorus has like an 8-bar phrase to it where, again, the rhythm doesn't change, but the notes, the pitches themselves do. And occasionally they choose not to and rest on one pitch for an elongated amount of time while still utilizing that same rhythm. I don't remember this happening after we kick it into overdrive. And like my brain's firing on all cylinders right now. What could this mean? And part of me thinks like, oh, well maybe it's depression and you just You can't find the motivation to do anything, and then there's these moments that are rougher than usual where you can't even go through the motions and you're just stuck at this one level. And then, well, what's the overdriven part? I'm like, oh, maybe that's breaking out of it. Maybe that's a manic element. Maybe this is a song about bipolar disorder. I still don't know, but I'm starting to see these patterns throughout. And I'm really curious what the lyrics are going to be about. Maybe they give me some insight into this. And I guess we're going to hit the lyrics. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I wanted to talk about here. I mean, there's two vocals too, two vocalists or two vocal parts that do harmony in our chorus. Again, the part where we actually have a larger phrasing based on chord progression. I don't. I mean, it's a nice vocal harmony. There's nothing that adds to it. But is it a component of this theme? That's another thing I'm trying to figure out. I don't know. Let's hit the lyrics and see what I can glean from that. Oh yeah, there was there was one more thing, and that's our ending. And the lyrics reminded me of this because it just says multiple screaming. And like this completely shifts my perspective on the hypothesis I had that this might have been a song about bipolar disorder, because the outro is noise. Coming into this moment from our final chorus, it is just rising static against our foundational concept that we've been listening to this whole time. And then eventually, multiple lines of screaming and some words being repeated and overlapped on each other. It's very difficult to understand any of it, which makes the vocal lines a type of noise as well that contribute to the static that we're getting from this rising white noise that's covering everything up. And that's when I realized the song is sort of linearly built. We don't start out clean and then move into distorted and come back to clean and then exit out on distorted. If I remember correctly, it's clean, then distorted, and then the noise, and then the screaming. It's a linear rise of energy. And I got nothing for that. As well as these lyrics. There's two spoken word sections that just seem to. I don't know. The intro is it's an address. 733 Northwest Knoll Drive, California 90069. Followed by three numbers: 659, 7812, 3108. Coordinates? Maybe? I mean, coordinates are typically longitude and latitude, but there is technically also the z axis for height. I don't know how often that's used, but given that we have an address, my first thought is location, and we can use three numbers for location. Oh, I suppose. But then it follows with chew, 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 but not like CHEW, like chewing, but like the spelling we would put for a choo choo train. This is done again in verse 2 when we get two numbers, 8,000, or sorry, 85,588, and then 30. Then a series of letters: DM, D, M, G, M. And I put the pauses there because the first two letters, the D and the M, are put together, whereas everything else is separated by commas, and then it just says row MM. And at best, I'm kind of hoping this is some sort of uh like AR game or some sort of, I guess it doesn't have to be AR, but some sort of puzzle for fans to decipher. What does this mean? How can we look at these numbers and letters in other ways and decipher what's being said here? But I don't know if that's something Blur would do. I don't know the band well enough. And so it just kind of seems oddball to me, especially when our verses and chorus don't seem to have anything about those things unless knowing what these things are gives more information. Our verse just says, I have no style, I take my time, I doze away, that's just the way it is, which kind of embodies that lethargic, going through the motions idea that I had talked about that the music is leaning into. The chorus says, I've got Trimm Trabb. I don't know what that is. Like the Flash Boys have. And I can't go back, so I let it flow and I sleep alone. This is where that spinning the tires in the mud music sets in, where we get the repeated rhythm, but not the melodic flow, where we just sit on a single note. And I think that's on the Let It Flow section. And I don't know. This one's not as clear to me as the first verse. And then our second verse is just a repetition of that's the way it is. Our bridge repeats our first verse. We have a chorus for a third time. And then the screaming after the rising stat. I don't want to say that Blur isn't doing something interesting here. I feel like I'm right on the cusp of understanding this one, which puts me in a much better place than yesterday's Jets. And that makes me think that they are doing something rather artistic. They have an intentional goal in mind for a mindset or an emotion or a feeling that they want the listener to be in or that they would like to convey to the listener. And I do feel that they achieved it even if I didn't quite get what they were going for. Again, it could be something into decipherable, possibly decipherable puzzles that they leave in here that would give me just the little bit of information to go on, but also after listening to yesterday's Jets, their lyrics, at least in that song and in this song, could just be intentionally vague in a way to suggest something without being extremely overt about it. I don't know. Those are my thoughts, though, on Blur's Trimm Trabb. Interesting idea, but just way too repetitive for me. But what did you think? Did you enjoy it? Is there anything that stood out to you? Anything that I said that you'd like to add on to or correct me on? Let me know down in the comments. Above the comment section is a description box, and in there is a link for Linktree. Takes you to this menu right here, which has links for everything related to the channel. You can find my music in there. You can find links to the Discord community. You can find multiple ways to support the channel and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. Alright, that wraps it up for today, but we'll be back tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 p.m. UTC, as usual. We'll continue on with this week's theme of the blank song, and we'll look at another special selection. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.